All right, it is 6:30, and this is the February 15th meeting of the Barrington Planning Board. I'm Jeff Brand, officially vice chair, but acting chair as the previous chair has left the board. Tonight we have with us Donna Masucci, who is technically an alternate, but because we have two absences tonight, she will be sitting on the board tonight. We have Andrew Malnikas. We have Andrew Knapp, our ex officio member, and Steve Diamond is participating remotely. We also have here John Huckins, he's code enforcement officer. We have Barbara Irvine, she's the administrative assistant and from the planning office. We also have Connor McIver, who provides excellent support to the planning board. He's our town administrator. And we also have remotely Carol Ogilvie. So first order of business is approval of the February 1st, 2022 meeting minutes. Everybody has been provided copies. Does anyone have comments? And Steve, just so you know, you are muted and we cannot see your face, so you'll have to unmute so we can hear you.
You can't see me at all. It's just kind of dark.
Yes. Oh, well, we got this faint, very faint picture. It looks like
Whatever light you have in the background is good. Way up in the back.
It looks like you decided to do this from the closet in which there isn't a light. So, all right. Does anyone have any comments? All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. So we have a motion by Andrew Knapp and a second by Andrew Malnikas to approve the minutes. So we'll do a roll call vote. Okay. Jump right in. Andy? Andy one.
Aye.
Andy M.
Andy M. Aye.
All right. Andy K.
Aye.
Steve Diamond.
Diamond eye.
And Brian I. So the minutes are approved. All right. The next order of business is that we have an application here from Robert Russell from 2A Tactical.
Oh, no, May 3rd, never mind.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm on.
All right. Okay, so it's 2A Tactical, and this is an application that we have been working on for some period of time to construct a business on Route 125. So I will let you speak, but I think that just to bring everybody up, where we got to is basically we were just waiting to finish up some details that you were responding to the engineers who did the review. Everything was minor, and we needed time to prepare a draft notice of decision, which we have now done. So,
yeah. Scott Frangus, Hampshire Land Consultant, Unified Builders. We did resubmit to CMA. We got another review this afternoon. There's only minor edits to the plan set. We have to finish up, and then the DOT permit's still outstanding.
okay. Does the board have any questions for the applicant? All right.
Septic hasn't been approved yet, still has it?
No, we're still septic.
That was on the notice, but you said that's on.
All right. If I refresh my memory, did we already open up and had the public hearing on this particular application?
Yeah, but you still want to open.
We still want to open it, yeah. All right, so if the board has no questions, then I will open the public hearing. Would anybody like to make a comment on this application? If anybody's listening remotely, you'll need to unmute, and it's *6
If you're on a phone, it's *6, which there's nobody here on the phone. So if you're on the Teams program, you can raise your hand or enter a chat in the chat feature. Please be recognized by the chair.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment? Okay,
See anything through on this side, Mr. Chair?
all right. So hearing no one that wishes to make comment, I will close public comment. Does the board feel that it needs to have any more discussion on this application?
At one point, we're missing
Yeah, I think
the
we've
cross
got-
section for Bumford Road. Did that come in?
We were missing the cross section for,
Yeah, that was on the plan. They had one
Yeah.
comment on that.
yeah, they have, that's been added. And CMA had one minor comment they're fixing on the plan. So that's been taken care of. All right, we have a draft notice of decision. And so I'll read this. We have the applicant, of course, is request by applicant Robert Russell, 2A Tactical LLC for site review, waivers to construct 6,000 square foot two-story building with 11,080 square feet of usable space. And draft notice of decision. This is to inform you that the Barrington Planning Board at its February 1st, 2022 meeting initially approved your application referenced above. All the precedent conditions below must be met by the applicant at the expense of the applicant prior to the plans being certified by the planning board. Certification of the plans is required prior to commencement of any site work or recording of any plans. Once these precedent conditions are met and the plans are certified, the approval is considered final. Please note if all precedent conditions are not met within 6 calendar months to the day by August 1st, 2022, the board's approval will be considered to have lapsed unless a mutually agreeable extension has been granted by the board. Now, the reference conditions precedents are add the following plan notes at the October 5th, 2021 planning board meeting. Board approved waivers for the requirement to have a legend on pages 9 through 16 per section 3.2.7 of the site plan review regulations, and the requirement for a full traffic impact analysis per section 4.14 site plan review regulations. Next, 1B, at the February 1st, 2022 planning board meeting, the board approved waivers for the planning board waives the requirement for internal shade trees per section 4.9.7 parents 4 and perimeter shade trees per 4.9.7 parents 5 of the site plan review regulations. 1C is add a note referencing the select board's approval for work on the class 6 road. We also request that you add the following to the plan: the owner's signature, DOT approval number, and septic approval number. Number 3, you pay any outstanding fees to the town. Number 4, prior to obtaining the board's signature, the applicant shall submit 3 complete paper print plan sets and supporting documents as required in Article 3 with a letter explaining how the applicant addressed the conditions of approval. This shall include final and complete reports for all items submitted during a review for the town of Barrington's file. The chairman shall endorse 3 copies of the approved plan meeting the conditions of approval. The town shall retain a signed and approved reproducible 11 by 17 inch and PDF format with supporting documents for town records. The applicant's engineer shall certify in writing the improvements have been constructed as approved prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy. Where now for general and subsequent conditions, where no active and substantial work required under this approval has commenced upon the site within 2 years from the date the plan is signed, the approval shall expire. An extension not to exceed 1 year may be granted by majority vote of the board, so long as it's applied for at least 30 days, prior to the expiration date. The board may grant only one such extension for any proposed site plan. All other plans must be submitted to the board for review to ensure compliance with these and other town ordinances. Active and substantial work is defined in this section as being the expenditure of at least 25% of the infrastructure improvements required under this approval. Infrastructure shall mean, in this instance, the construction of roads, storm drains, and improvements as indicated on the site plan. conditioned on a approval vote. I wish you the best of luck with your project. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact. Yes.
It should be the scientist.
Number 2.
The mark in the back.
Okay, so we want to add, a D, wetlands.
You guys, was it a soil?
Okay. Wetlands scientist. Stamp. All right. With that modification, does the applicant or anybody on the board have any questions? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the application.
Make a motion to approve application 251-63-RC-21-SR.
All right,
Do I hear a second?
Second that.
all right. So we had a motion by Andy Melnikas and a second by Don Machusi to approve the application. So I'll have a roll call vote. And this time I'll start with Andy Knapp.
Aye.
All right, Steve Diamond.
Diamond Eye?
All right, Donna Masucci,
Suchi, aye.
Andrew Menikis,
NDMI.
and Jeff Brand, aye. So that passes unanimously. Congratulations. I know it was a long haul, but we finally got there. Thank you. Good luck. Okay. Okay, the next order of business is that Ryan Caverly, 178 Young Road, Union Lake Orchard, would like to have a discussion with the board about adding a use to the orchard. So, you want to do Caverly?
Yep.
Okay.
Good evening, Ryan Caverly, from Young Road. I run the short there with my mother, my aunt, we're pursuing now there is added use to an existing structure on the property. And hosting events there, small events, part-time during the year. So basically information gathering that tonight to find out what I need to do to apply for waivers and like for everything on the application checklist that we may apply for.
Okay. I think that, can you give us a better idea of, I've seen the barn going up. I live on France Road, go by your orchards. I've also enjoyed some of your peaches. So can you tell us the size, I mean, kind of what you're thinking of as far as the use within the building, numbers of people?
Yeah, okay, so that will be dependent on the fire chief. Obviously, will be dictating the maximum number of occupants, but we're looking at, party sizes of 150 to 180 or less. As capacity.
And it mentions weddings. Are there any other types of functions that you're talking about?
We've already been, the reason we're doing this is we've experienced a tremendous demand from, people just coming up there, seeing the structure, and wanting to host things there. So it's, parties of any type, wedding, the Barrington Garden Club came up and asked if they could host there. So it's a general purpose space. But primarily what we'd be looking at as a added value to the existing business would be weddings, I would think.
Can you tell them how often you think that these things would act as a function?
As far as, the medium to large size party, however you look at that, like of 150 to 80, it would be primarily Saturdays, and we're looking at 28 days a year that it would be operating at, maximum capacity. Obviously, if somebody wanted to come in and use it for a couple hours during the week to host, say, the garden club, I don't know how many people are in that, 25 maybe. So maybe more days during the year than 28, but the greatest impact would be about 28 days a year.
Just year round, all seasons, or just summer?
No, it would be from the end of April to the beginning of October.
I was gonna say, so you're looking at roughly 7 months.
Yes.
Saturdays.
Yes.
And then I'm assuming as your venue gains in popularity, those days will stretch out as well. Like, often places that have weddings have Friday night events, Saturday events.
Potentially, yes, if there's the great enough demand for it, yeah.
You had explained to me when you were talking about the times when it would be open for beach sales, the times when it would be open for functions, and how you were gonna those so they didn't overlap. If you could explain that to this board.
Sure, yeah. So typically Saturdays are fairly busy for us on the Peach Orchard, but if we were hosting events there, usually those wouldn't be any time before noon. So we would halt operation at the orchard at noon and pick up the other operations later in the evening. So you wouldn't experience, I guess, any sort of increase in traffic impact or anything like that.
And the parking lot would be big enough to handle the separate functions.
Yes,
It's the building I can see from the road.
yes,
Just a quick question. Have you spoken with the chief yet?
yes.
Okay. The reason I ask is I'm guessing his occupancy is, the number he's going to use for occupancy is based on so much per person with the table, so much footage.
It's 15 square feet per person as
You
well.
mentioned any emergency lighting, exit lighting, anything?
Yes, yes, he did. Emergency lighting on stairs, emergency lighting at the exit with the exit sign.
So you have you have to provide two deck, 2 stories or single?
It is 3 stories. I assume that we probably wouldn't end up using the 3rd story for large events like that. That may be up to the fire chief. And I
think that the 2nd story, I'm not sure, probably have to have some kind of, what do you call it, sprinkler. I'm not.
That's something that will depend on a number of factors that he was going to look at for us. And he hasn't contacted us back about that, but it was has to do with the height of the structure at certain areas and the square footage and the occupancy. And he said usually it was things around 10,000 foot of commercial space or something like that was about when you started to see those. And he thought that was unlikely to be necessary in a structure of our size.
So you have a well.
Building code, it's 10,000 square feet for a wood frame structure for use.
10,000.
Before sprinklers kick in.
Say
If you
for
got more than
business.
30 feet, if you got more than 30 feet around the building, there's a 50% increase on the occupant load before that kicks in.
Okay.
But that's for a business use. This one here, the reason why I had him go talk to Rick is Rick might see this as an assembly use where it's more of a thing for a gathering, which the dimensions all changed. So I think it's like 7,000 and then 10,000 if you have the 30 feet around, which that building does.
Mm.
So I think that's how Rick's interpreting that space before the sprinklers kick in. And that if you have fixed tables or you have movable tables or standing area, each one of them give a different occupant load per square foot. And that's what all this stuff was that they're trying to work out. We had a conversation on that before they went down to talk to Rick too.
Good, good. Thank
What
you.
is the size of the structure?
44 by 44 is the footprint. It's 30 feet tall at the peak. The first floor is approximately 1,900 square feet. The second floor is half of that, and the third floor is half of that again.
Going back
It's
to
also
parking,
think about-
Excuse me?
going back to the parking, I've only seen the very initial parking area for doing, for buying peaches, which is gravel and pretty small. Can you characterize how many cars you can park there and what the conditions are?
So we have a sort of a lower lot that we use for overflow parking. We've hosted events there before. We do a benefit for the Barrington Food Pantry, the peach pancake breakfast we do there. And we've had 64 cars there at a time in that lower lot. And then the upper lot where you have seen, I think there's about 50 spots there as well.
Both locations are gravel?
The second location is just grass, and it would remain that.
Question, cooking facilities on site?
Never in that building.
Okay.
Potentially a state-approved kitchen in one of the other buildings on site, but we don't have one at this time.
What about restroom facilities?
Again, not in that building. If we do have one, if there's a great enough demand and we, this is all approved and we go ahead with this, an outbuilding or one of the other structures on the building will host bathrooms, but for the time being, there are trailered bathrooms, which we'd bring in and bring out every weekend.
How about water? Do you have water in the building?
No, not, well, yes, I think we would.
If you bring water to the building, you're gonna be required to put a septic. Just wanna make sure.
A separate septic. Okay. Then no.
If you're having events, the chances are they're catered,
Yes,
so they're bringing
food and
the stuff.
they bring all the stuff.
There's cleanup, spillage, stuff like that.
Mhm.
That's why
I mean, that could all be obtained at the outbuilding.
And waste disposal?
As far as trash.
Yeah.
Uh,
Gonna have a dumpster or?
Yes.
Okay.
One more thing on the parking. If you just have a grass area, it's kind of important for it to either be managed or to have the spaces be marked in some way. Which of those two things are you going to do?
I'm sorry, what was the first?
It would either be
it's-
managed or it's gonna be marked. Managed being, there would be people to direct.
It would be managed.
And then lighting, if you're doing evening events, are you doing evening events?
They would go into the evening.
So what's your plan for lighting?
On the orchard proper outside, where there's parking and such, we would have solar powered street lamps that we would put up temporarily. Well, they'd be on post, but they wouldn't be on all the time. It would be on for events, and then we turn them off.
Is that something to look at? I mean, I'm not sure. Is that something?
It's similar to what you did for wildlife encounters. They had that section where they had those types of lights.
Right.
Lower parking lot won't come in.
But they're directed downward because, right, we don't want to increase
When he put.
light pollution in a particular area.
They-
Yeah, I reviewed the section on that and the.
Not grass.
They have a gravel lot plus,
One of the things that,
that's why you.
give you a break for a second, that as a board, we need to discuss is how he's looking for what he needs to do if he wants to pursue this. John Huckins and I have had a discussion as to, if you look, this is in the general residential zone. And so looking at Article 19, where would this fall? And this is a category, this is a commercial use. This is not, if you look at what's been decided in the law with respect to orchard, this would not be considered an accessory use because there was a case that's been closely examined that was almost identical circumstances. It was it's a Christmas tree farm. They had a barn.
I read the case.
Okay, yeah, Forrester versus Town of Henniker. And the courts have made it pretty clear that if the function is not tied directly to the principal use, then it's really not considered an accessory use. So, so this is not an ancillary use to the peach farming. This is a separate function. So if we look at this as a separate function within Article 19, we have various businesses and categories under commercial use, which is, this is commercial. I assume you're not doing this for free.
No.
So this is a commercial use, and the one that appears to me to best fit the circumstances, given the businesses listed, would be a conference center. Does the rest of the board think about that?
John, think about it.
I think it fits because of the meetings for different types of functions.
Right.
And it's allowed in the zone with a conditional use permit.
Okay, yeah,
Right,
definitely.
okay. Steve, you comfortable with that?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right, so if we do that under the general residential zone, then that would require a conditional use permit. So if we go back to the requirements for a conditional use permit, then there are a series of questions that have to be answered. Now, there will be a narrative that would be required to be answered for each of the questions under each of the conditions under a conditional use permit. For instance, the building structure use specifically authorized under the terms of this ordinance, if completed, the proposed location will comply with all the requirements of the ordinance. Building and structure will not materially endanger the public health or safety. Okay, so you're giving him a list.
That way he can call.
Yeah, he can fit. It can't substantially devalue abutting property. The building and structure will be compatible with the neighborhood. The structure will not have a substantial adverse impact on highway or pedestrian safety. The building structure use will not have a substantial adverse impact on the natural and environmental resources of the town, and adequate public utilities, community utilities, road capacity are available to the property. It will not necessitate excessive public expenditures in providing public services, and where deemed necessary when considering an application for conditional use approval, the board may require that adequate visual buffers be established. So in order for you to do this, you'd have to come into the board, file an application for a conditional use permit. These questions would have to be answered as both a narrative, but then I think in your particular case, you're talking about a commercial operation here. You're talking about traffic on Young Road, and you're talking about parking. Be aware that when you have parking areas, the runoff, that's considered an impervious surface. So you know, the larger the parking areas that you have, you're gonna have to, these are kind of broad questions, but I think there's some specific thing that the board is gonna be looking for.
Mhm.
You've got impervious surfaces that you have it there. I think,
So we wouldn't be adding any impervious surfaces. It's either grass or it's gravel. Those are, neither of those are impermeable.
that's not true. Gravel parking lots are considered an impervious surface.
Okay.
Okay.
But if it's an existing lot, do I need to do a study on?
He's not changing the site. He doesn't want to change anything.
Right, he doesn't want to change the site. The question is,
You have to show there's adequate parking for.
you got to show there's adequate parking for the number of people that you got. And to do that, you kind of have to go up and look at, it's in the site review regulations. It talks about parking, so many parking
Yeah,
spots
I've
per number.
viewed that.
It's okay. The question is,
You did go over. them.
for the agricultural use, the parking area that he has, then he wouldn't have to come in or, you know, to give us any information on where the drainage is going under the site review because of the agriculture use. But now that he's changing the use,
He's
to a
not
commercial
changing the
use.
site.
okay, he's not changing the site, but he is changing the use.
That doesn't change drainage, I guess is the point. If he uses his continued parking area, if he has to add parking spaces, it would change the site and the drainage. But if he's not adding parking spaces because when he does the size of the building for the number of parking spaces needed, if he doesn't change the site, he's not changing the drainage. So he's not gonna, then nothing on the site's gonna change.
Okay,
Now, if he doesn't have enough parking and he has to create a bigger parking area, then I agree, the site changes, so
Then-
that changes the.
so he's gonna have to address that.
And that's in there, we talked about that for them to determine.
Okay.
The number of parking sites.
Okay,
What it, the concept was the biggest, draw up his own plan.
okay.
And he's got it pretty well to scale in the whole bit where he was just changing the use and not changing the site. And that's where I said, you guys would have to determine because you've always had a stamp survey plan. And how you feel about this, where it's a change of use, but the site's not being changed. How far do you want to take that? That was.
Well, and that's when that's why I wanted to have this discussion about with this change in use, how far, you know, do we want to go? If you look at a change in use for a site plan, which I understand this is conditional use, but the kinds of questions that are answered by the change in use on a site plan are essentially ultimately the same questions that are being required to be answered for the conditional use permit, which is, are you affecting the environment? Are you affecting the traffic? You know, it's the same general information the board needs in order to approve the conditional use permit. So, but there is a change in parking. Yes, you'd have to address the drainage issues. Yeah, it sounds like you've already looked. Illumination, you know, you are going to need to meet the reference for the board for illumination standards for a commercial activity are in our site plan view. So those, and, you know, light pollution is an issue up in that particular neighborhood in that particular area. So that would be the guidelines to go by and need to be addressed.
So
I
talking
think-
about lighting, because this is part of the conversation I had with you. Lighting, you want a lighting plan showing all the decibels and stuff coming
Yep.
down. The wildlife encounters, you didn't go that far because you were just worried about having people when they're leaving, his activity has bond coming out.
Right,
So how far do you want, because of this type of use,
right.
you want this change? These were the questions that he had that
Right.
couldn't-
I would suggest that we apply the same standards that we did for wildlife encounters, which is as long as there's sufficient lighting for people to get from the facility to their cars, you wouldn't necessarily have to meet the illumination standards that would be required under a site review.
So he wouldn't have to do the lighting plan. I guess
Wouldn't-
that's the question.
You wouldn't have to do a detailed illumination plan.
Okay, that's exactly the point, yeah.
Right, he still needs to do a lighting plan, because we need to know to demonstrate to us that whatever lighting you got between the parking lot and the facility is going to be
That's what I mean.
minimally adequate to get people safely back and forth, but also not create an excessive amount of light or light pollution. If you are going to have lighting on the exterior of the building, that would need to be addressed. We'd have to know what type of fixtures and how the building's going to be illuminated.
Mhm.
And that's referenced in here about doing an elevation of the building, showing the lighting. And somewhere in the plan, you say, I'm going to use this type of lighting, we got the same thing from Wildlife Encounters. They came in and said, here's the fixtures we're going to use. And there's a lot of them that are available. We see them on plans all the time. They're, downward pointing, they're, how they're addressed. And I think they did use solar powered.
They brought in the cut sheets to their solar
Right.
powered ones
Yep.
that they were putting
Yep.
outside.
So,
Those were set up temporarily too.
right. I think the issue with the bathrooms, how you're going to address that. You said it's going to be trailered, but that needs to be addressed in your proposal, your application, because we have to ensure there isn't any environmental impact here. I mentioned the traffic. I think, what else did we?
Analysis or just the number of people today that is similar to when his peach orchard's at full swing, to show that that's what the cutoff line was that we're trying to get. That's the reason why you come in.
Yeah, it's certainly not a full traffic analysis.
I know, but that's what.
What's he's gonna have to estimate, I would think, the trips per day time versus the traffic. There must be a traffic study that's been done on Young Road at some time or another.
On Saturday.
That's, I guess, the point. He would have to hire a professional to get that stuff done. So that's why he's here, because of.
Right, I understand.
I didn't know the answer to what you.
Doing
guys
all the
were
talking.
asking.
What do you
That's
guys,
why I told him to come in.
other board members, what do you think with respect to the traffic?
I think we definitely need to know what the impact of traffic is gonna look like.
But what's your, each season?
So I could tell you off the top of my head about, so during the day on a busy Saturday, we'll have 250 cars come up and down that driveway. If we're halting operations at noon, and I think for I looked at it in the application review process. The number, it was 4 cars per 4 people per car, or 1 car per 4 people was the figure that I was looking at. And if we're looking at a occupancy of 180 people, that's well under what we see in a normal day on a busy peach orchard day.
And has it caused any problems with your season, your peak season?
I mean, so there are a couple of variables here that come to mind for me. One is when I look at it, 4 people in a car is really optimistic. Like, the reality is, for an event, it's probably going to be more like 2 people per car. So you're going to see at least 90 vehicles. And with the operation of the peach orchard, it's 200 cars coming and going throughout the day. You're talking about 90 cars all in one shot on this. One of the other variables that we haven't talked about are, what are the intended hours of operation for this venue?
Noon to 10.
10 p.m.
Whatever the cutoff for the
So then
noise ordinance,
the noise ordinance is 9 p.m.
9 p.m.
Yeah, you're right. We are going to need to understand the business hours, and they may be a condition of approval of the conditional use permit. So that needs to be addressed in the application. With respect to the traffic impact analysis, so like I said, because it's a conditional use permit and the questions are rather broad, we have to go back into other regulations, take a look. Now, site review, that provides some information. I think probably the most informative for the board to look at would be the traffic impact analysis for a subdivision. If you look at the minimum threshold It says, traffic impact analysis shall be required in the following circumstances. Subdivision involves creation of 20 more residential lots. This is not what this is. But it says the subdivision is intended to facilitate non-residential land uses. I think that's sort of what we're talking about here. We got an agricultural use that is now, we're going to add a non-residential land use. So the question is, would this be, you know, the informational requirements is just the plan lays out the amount, nature, impact of the traffic generated, interior, exterior circulation, parking, or loading, emergency vehicle access. Would those be applicable requirements to apply to this particular type of conditional use?
Yeah, you would want emergency access, especially if you're having a wedding or whatever.
Right.
But he's looking for, what do I specifically need to do? What does the board want to see? And it seems like this is in 7.5 under the subdivision regulations.
Well, if you go into 14.4, traffic on the site review.
Where, under site review, okay, wait a minute, 14 what?
14.1, and it talks about the size of the building, the amount of trips that are gonna be generated today, and that kind of stuff. And it got a whole layout for when that traffic analysis would be required.
So Jeff, I'm still thinking about your original question about accessory use.
Yep.
And I think a reasonable argument could be made about accessory use, but probably not at the scale, at the frequency of events and the scale of events that he's talking about. So I think back to what I understand the purpose of the agritourism statute in state law to be, and my understanding is that it's to try to make farm operations more viable in the state by diversifying their options.
Well, the
And,
Supreme Court says differently. The Supreme Court directly addressed that issue and said under accessory use, and if you look at our definition of accessory use in our regulations, and what the court said that whatever it is that you're adding, like agritourism, and I think you and I both went to one of the conferences over in Concord, deals with, promoting, the agricultural use. In this particular case, and it was an identical case with the Christmas tree farm in Henniker and them having a facility where they were hosting weddings. And of course said, no, that's not tied to the principal use of the property, which is the farming operation, the agricultural operation. That is not related. That does not support the actual agricultural use of the property. So the court was pretty clear that this kind of use is not considered to be an accessory use for an agricultural operation.
Wasn't considered agritourism is how they.
Right, it's not agritourism.
My point is basically that I would consider the argument if the scale was quite a bit less than what he's talking about. But from what he's saying about the number of events and the size of them, I think, yes, we're talking about conditional use permit and commercial activity.
Okay.
I gave him my copy of the traffic stuff, so if you're reading that, he can.
So analysis, if you go to 414, it says all projects creating 5,000 square feet or more of new non-residential floor space. This doesn't appear to be above 5,000,
Well, it's
but
a
it,
new space, but it's a new use. So I think you have to almost look at it. You can understand why I wanted to bring you guys in to make the decision, I think, if you follow.
How do we determine, how do we classify something as when we talk about a new space? Because like 2 years ago, this was not like, this didn't exist. We've all watched it go up as it's been done. So all of a sudden now it's a new space. It wasn't there. It's been built, and now we're looking to modify the use from a barn that was built on a property to an event center on a property.
And because it's a new use, could you look at it as a new structure? That's the reason why I felt he needed to come to you as a conceptual idea so that you could lay out the parameters of what you needed. But that minor traffic thing, even if you look at it, at what extent do you need them to go to, I guess that's what they're here for. They want to know exactly what it is you want them to bring forward.
Okay, in looking at both the site plan review regulations as well as the subdivision regulations, I would say that a full traffic impact analysis is not required. Based on the size of the operation, that wouldn't be.
I totally agree with that.
Okay, so the question is whether we need a short traffic impact analysis. If you follow either one of the regulations for subdivision or site plan review, you kind of get to the same place, although maybe the short traffic impact analysis
Close to where he might not even need one. It's right on that edge.
is right on the edge.
That's why I
But
wanted,
so, given the location, given the traffic and the time on that road, given, I mean, it is a secondary road.
then you get.
Yeah, you're right. We're kind of on.
But you got existing traffic analysis that he has because of the other stuff going on in his events. I understand your concept. This is all at once, but the other stuff is spread out. Now you know why I said you need to come to the board.
Yeah,
But not only from that aspect, but now you have an additional competing use on that road above and beyond the fact that like you have the lake, then the orchard and just everything else that compiles in there. Because you look at the traffic impact, if you do a traffic study on that road now, it's going to come back probably fairly low. But if you do a traffic study on that road in mid-July, it's a whole different game on that road.
And
I mean,
that's
you're
when
taking
it's
your
gonna
life in your
operate.
hands.
well,
walking
given
up
that
and
we've
down
made
road.
repairs on that road, I got to believe that the road agent has information on what
Wow.
current traffic on that road.
The people that would do the traffic analysis would have summer traffic counts in fall, the traffic counts from previous years that they use for their analysis.
Right.
So I guess where we're going with this, are you going to require him to do the short traffic analysis as part of this application? So he knows that to know what he has to bring forward going
Right.
forward. That's
Yeah.
what the question's at today.
Another aspect of this, given, what Young Road looks like topographically and curvature wise, I know that going up the hill to the barn, you're coming over a crest, you've got a hill there. Another reason to do the analysis to make sure, particularly where you're going to have cars turning in and out at nighttime,
So the site
that
distance.
adequate
Right.
sight distances there.
So the consensus is you want him to do the short traffic?
I
analysis?
think, personally, I think a short traffic analysis is appropriate in this circumstance.
I agree.
Donna, what do you think?
Uh,
Okay, Steve? Yeah, okay.
Yep,
Andy,
I
all
agree.
right. Yeah, yes,
If I might just ask, the town with our partnership with Stratford Regional Planning Commission, they do traffic counts, not analysis, but counts.
Right.
We're allotted a certain number a year, we usually do
Yeah.
rotating basis. To my knowledge, it hasn't been done on Young Road recently. In order to help, so the analysis doesn't include the counts, it's possible that we could schedule a traffic counts this year with SRPC in a timing that would work for a traffic analysis. Best case scenario, when would you hope to start?
This spring would be best, or this summer would be best case scenario.
The timing might not work out well for that, because I would assume that we want that traffic data to be high use during the summer. When
Yes.
there's lake traffic.
We may have some of it from about 4 years ago when we did the culvert replacement across Young
that's
Road.
what I was thinking.
But that would be
The point I was
Best
trying to make,
case.
when these guys that do traffic analysis, they got all that data from past histories, from different stuff they got.
Yeah, they all collated.
Right, so
Okay.
because that's done, they wouldn't have to do an actual traffic count today. They could base it off the information they have of that area
Right.
in the past.
What-
So he could get that done now without
Right.
waiting until the June traffic count.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But,
Okay,
but it would have to be done by a
all
traffic
right,
engineer.
but the board's in, the
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
board's in agreement, though, that we believe that you got to go look at meeting requirements for a short traffic impact analysis. It's in 4.14.2 of the site plan review regulations.
Now, it's an area we haven't talked a lot about, but just talked about from the entry exit, but from the driveway standpoint, the way that driveway comes out onto the road, it also dumps a lot of sediment kind of out onto it. And I know they went and dug that out to try and fix some of the drainage around there. And that,
Is there a paved apron onto that driveway?
no.
I would suggest that that's something that should be considered. I mean, we do require paved aprons, right, on
For newly constructed.
newly
driveways.
constructed driveways. And given the usage, the amount of usage on that particular driveway, given the number of cars, I would think that would be appropriate for us to consider.
Talk to the road agent. He could show you what that typical 16-foot of pavement is, and it's supposed to have a negative from the road going back, so that the water coming down the driveway doesn't go out, it goes off to the swales. There's like a, but if you talk to them, he can help you with that, and set up for what you need.
Thank you.
The other question that I had is signage. Is there a plan for signage for this, or?
Not at present.
Right now, the signage got changed out of site review. It's actually in zoning to where if it meets a certain requirement.
Right.
And if it doesn't meet it, they have to go to the ZBA. It's no
Right.
longer in the plan.
Right.
It got changed a couple of years ago.
Yep, go ahead.
It was just one of those things that I know, like currently they're, like when summer hits, you see the peach signs come up, so, you know, are we gonna see like wedding venue signs?
No. No.
Including the ones on the telephone poles at the end of France Road on Hall Road that says peaches. We're not gonna see weddings.
No, no, they get an address. We have telephones that look that up for us now.
But you know, Eversource isn't a fan of those signs anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
So are you allow alcohol?
Yes, typically that is something that is handled by the caterer. So I talked to the fire chief about this, and he said that that was something that they looked at when, you know, he'll come and look at the structure, see. That's one of the things he looks at is, you know, is the it's safe for people who are impaired.
All part of the stuff that's listed in the building code.
Well,
Which
here, we don't want them on the road.
They all got a DD.
Or we can get the police chief to sit down at the bottom of the driveway. You know?
This came up at Bedrock Gardens. It was really big to do because there are neighbors so close and there are people inebriated and things got loud. So it did get a little bit controversial down there.
Well, that brings up a technical question for a conditional use permit. I'm having a failure of memory here. Are they required to notify the abutter?
Abutters are notified when their application comes forward for any planning board application.
Okay.
So when they come
A
forward.
band or a
you-
DJ or?
yes.
Just like any other.
All right. So you're still going to have to
So he's got to
comply.
do a site review along with the conditional use.
Well, they're
permit.
discussing that. When you talk to the chief, just ask him about when you have a function.
Mhm.
People want to dress up the inside like bales of hay or live decorations,
Mhm.
which will be, I'm guessing in his mind will be a no-no.
I'll ask him about it. I'll make sure to.
Yeah.
Cover the bases,
Yeah.
everything.
Any restrictions on decorating materials?
Mhm.
There is a thing in the code about things that can catch on fire. There's a
Live,
percentage that you can have. to
live
decide
Christmas
whether-
trees, bales of hay, and live wreaths, and
Yeah.
although you're not operating at Christmas time, but still people might want to get a jump on the festivities.
Scarecrow.
Okay. Other things that we'd want to see?
Okay, so on his plan, he has the existing parking that's there and he has, he does the plan. And shows all that on it and he shows he meets it. Are you gonna require him to go to a surveyor to have the stamp of the plan? Or if he has a plan drawn up accurately with dimensions on it, is that something, that was one of the questions that I had when I first started talking. about regulations says a stamp survey plan, so you would have to waive that requirement if you decide to go that route. So that was one of the costs that he was here tonight to talk about.
Well, I guess my personal feelings is, given this is a commercial, non-residential use, it's not huge, but it is a significant number of people and functions taking place over a large period of time. Given the location, I would think that we'd want a stamp plan.
Yeah,
Like we normally do.
yeah. I'm asking right now.
I
Because they-
no, I
they
understand.
brought it
I
up,
mean,
yeah.
what does the rest of the board think?
Thank you, John.
Steve Diamond?
Personally, I think a well-drawn to scale, non-professional plan drawing would be adequate, in my view.
Okay.
I agree.
I
with
agree.
Steve.
I agree with Steve.
Agreed.
I'm fine either way.
All right.
So you said they can use their own plan with their own stamp.
That's,
Be,
it appears that, yeah,
Okay, because that's gonna be a
Right.
waiver requested.
I understand.
Okay, just want to make sure we'll get all that stuff ready when we come back.
I mean, I think the big driver from the stamp plan end for me is if there was gonna be a border proximity issue where we were doing something close to property lines, that's where the stamp plan becomes
I would
more impactful.
abide by all setbacks.
Well, and
I
if
mean,
they
you got
were,
a pretty
well,
large piece of
the
property.
thing would be if they're going to alter the site, which they're not gonna do.
Right.
I mean, I could live with that. I mean, if that's what the rest of the board, I'm the lone wolf here, this is a board. It's majority rules, so if other people are comfortable with that and willing to support a waiver, then so be it. Back to so you talked about you'd have to have a dumpster in order to put the waste into. Typically, dumpsters go on top of some impervious surface, so if there's any leakage out of the dumpster, it doesn't run out into the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that needs to be addressed also in your plan.
Okay.
Usually they do like a concrete slab or something that.
Right.
Because if you start dumping it on asphalt, it doesn't take long to break it.
Mhm.
And that would have to be shown on your plan too, showing the dumpster location that you propose to have.
Would it have to be enclosed, John? You know, with the gates and,
For that type of use, I don't see why it would, but that's up to your discretion.
Not necessarily, but what you do have to do is contain any leakage from the container. So that's the function of the slab.
Most barn weddings, you bring things in and you take everything out. They take their trash with them.
Okay.
The
Oh, I like it.
caterer, the people responsible to clean up at the end, there's no dumpster.
If that's what you're proposing, then that's what you should say and not say you
Right.
can have a dumpster just to make it clear to the application.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, he mentioned,
Thank you. I,
all right. It's just, you said, if you have a dumpster, then you're gonna need to have a pad.
Yeah.
If you're not gonna have a dumpster, then obviously you don't need a pad, but
And in your
So you need to address-
It's gonna be a carry in, carry out, just so it's clearly defined during the.
I think
Right.
one of the pieces that would be helpful on this is almost like a rules or a guidance document for anybody looking to book the venue. Like, here are the expectations. The expectations are that you will provide catering, you will be responsible for
rental agreement.
sure.
right,
Yeah,
yeah, you are gonna have to have some kind of contract.
Oh, yes.
and
So if you could have a copy of that as part of your application, so the board could see how that's gonna work, that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be helpful. And talk about the hours,
right.
you know,
Because
Trash.
the noise component is
Yes.
actually an area, especially once you start adding alcohol in.
Mhm.
The DJ may stop at 9, but if people don't leave till 11, that noise isn't gonna stop carrying down, and being perched up on a hill, everything you have is gonna echo out across that whole area.
Okay.
The people from the lake will be coming over to join.
Right.
well, that's the other thing is to invite everybody at the lake up to the wedding.
Okay.
You're good with
No,
it.
no wedding crashers, please.
caterers bring in the booze, right? Liquor,
Would be, yes.
right.
Assuming it's-
So if somebody came to you and said, we want to bring our own bottle, what are your thinking?
No, that would be in the rental agreement. No,
Okay.
no,
Perfect.
it has to be licensed.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We don't know what the regulations are, but if you were going to have alcohol being served on site, we don't know if you need some kind of permit or license to do that. You need,
if the caterer has the license to do it and they're distributing it that way, it can be off of that license. Or, because if they were the ones doing the functions, then they would need that license to sell the liquor. But if a caterer is coming in and doing it, then the caterer will be supplying their license as part of their function that serves the alcohol.
What about BYOB?
You just said you want.
No, he just said no.
Right?
Yeah, we would have something in the rental agreement. that says No outside alcohol, everything has to go through the caterer.
And the caterer would take the trash away, including the alcohol.
Right.
'Cause you don't, somebody driving off that's got a bag full of beer cans and gets stopped, you know?
Or you'll find them strewn down Young Road,
Right at the lake, they'll drop them.
the boat launch.
Okay, what other,
I think we answered all the questions that we had discussed when we were coming in touch. Is there anything? Is there anything that you're uncertain of that you feel that you need to bring in order to understand to get this approval? You went through the regulation, talked about many different things you were going through.
Yes, yeah, as far as the application checklist, I don't have any more questions. If you have questions about.
So it looks like the only thing you're gonna have to hire out is that traffic analysis to get that done as part of this, and then supply the other stuff that was talked about.
You should, one more thought, you should probably make sure that it's either wheelchair accessible or you make it clear that it won't be wheelchair accessible.
Okay.
And about the noise. If the wind's carrying in a certain direction when the speedway's running, you can hear the super modifieds.
it is amazing.
Yeah, you
I
can
know, I
literally
can-
hear them.
I can hear it up
Yeah.
at the house, yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe living on France Road. Going down 125, I go, the speedway's this far away,
Right,
yeah.
and you can hear it.
In the summertime,
Yeah.
I stand out in the front porch, I can hear it. It is amazing. And sound travels across the lake pretty well too. All right,
Traffic analysis in building size to the amount of people, to figure the number of parking. To verify that what you have for parking spaces is adequate. They're gonna want that number too, I get, by the way they're talking here, to make sure that that parking was adequate.
and address those issues like we talked about. Well, you know, based on what you said, we're not gonna have a dumpster. We'll go outside. You know, we talked about the parking, the lighting. The restroom facilities. Address how you're gonna do that. If it's trucked in, then you say that, you know. Just because those are all things that we're gonna look at. And of course, you're gonna have to have a narrative. We suggest that you take and go through the list that John Huckins gave you under the 3.4. And for each one of those things,
Took it back, but we.
then, yeah, you'll address them each
Yeah.
item.
So you'd have that along with your site review application.
Mhm.
As you can see, a lot of things in that checklist are basically gonna be because how this is. And there was a couple of things, with the plan having to be a state survey plan. You would have to have a waiver request, asking for a waiver for that requirement, so they.
Yeah.
So
But some things, like John said, are not gonna be applicable, like may require adequate visual buffers be established. Well, I think you get that covered with the orchard. All right.
You should do fine once you get up and running, because I've dealt with this not here. And people really seem to like that setting for weddings.
Mhm.
I dealt with it back in a
I went to a
neighborhood.
couple of weddings the last couple of years and they've been in old barns. A lot of people have.
Yeah, they love it.
So you should do.
Yeah.
All right.
This is a new
Andy,
barn. It looks like an
anything
old barn.
No, I covered all of it.
Steve, do you have anything else?
No, best of luck, hope it works out.
Okay,
need event space.
so we've answered all the questions that you,
Yes, thank you very much.
Hey, good luck.
all right. Then this preliminary conceptual review is ended.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. All right. Didn't quite understand a discussion on water with the master plan, but the next up is.
Okay. Tom Willis, he's the guy that does the water withdrawal stuff for the state of New Hampshire when you have multiple entities to where the water has to be tested and they verify so this involves, he's dealt with the stuff with the station is because of that water supply. He's doing doing the one for Dove right now. He's in the middle of the Dove development, figuring out water supply and how it's gonna be handled. They're also, he's part of this stuff. One's for the across from the middle school. So, because of
And
that,
who does he work for?
the state of New Hampshire.
Okay,
And they're the ones that from the Water Bureau look at these small little systems.
community water system.
Correct.
Okay,
So when he does the community systems, he was talking about having like an association with a system kind of tied together because there could be, times where you wouldn't need another system for something else because there's plenty of water support. So these small systems can balance it out. And how our zoning is written on that whole thing with the town center and the village district, all systems, you know, the systems, how they are. He thought that because of what we've got going there and all the stuff that's in front of him now, and he knows about the Swains Lake District because he deals with that too. He suggested that maybe we could address something in the master plan that would help be moving from here to where you might want to change something in zoning or site review regs to where these systems can be intercommunicated, so they can share resources.
interconnected,
Yeah, sorry, what did I say?
intercommunicate.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. So
I
anyway,
thought the Pope was, of
he had-
water was talking.
He suggested about putting that in zoning. You guys were planning on this year, it was the future land use chapter was what you were going to be working on in your master plan. And this would fit perfectly within that. And he's more than happy to work with Stratford Regional about how to put this stuff together. And he's willing to come and talk to you guys how it all applies and goes together, whether it's for the stuff to put into zoning or if it's something you want to add to your site review or your subdivision regs. So I guess because it had been talked about and he brought this up, I know Carol has had quite a bit of working done with Stratford Regional Planning. She's got a good rapport and stuff with them. I didn't know if you wanted to have her reach out to them to start working on that future land use to try to get it started. And then Tom said he'd be willing to work with them straight up so that this stuff could get started so that you guys, so they could get that, so that you could get that chapter accomplished this year. So I wasn't trying to push to jump on that, but at the same time, when he called, it kind of made sense to start saying, do we want to start reaching out to Stratford Regional, put this stuff together now?
Makes a lot of sense.
Well, it makes sense, although on the water
Well, it's
part
kind
of
of a
that,
future land use that's kind of part of it.
right, I have to say this, interconnecting community water supplies sounds kind of like a logical idea, but when I think about the ones that we've approved over the last, 5 years, and I think, I mean, we couldn't even get a store and a restaurant next door to agree to hook up on the same well. But from a practical standpoint, if you think about the 60 unit, you think about the breweries up across there from the middle school, you think about Milo's, and that's community wells. From a practical standpoint, trying to connect those going underneath Route 9 in order to accomplish those that doesn't seem like a
Crossing
very
some of the
workable
roads,
plan.
probably not. Now, I talked to Rob, he's the guy doing the Dove development, because I was talking to him the same day that this guy called me. He said that because of what it costs to do the stuff with the Dove development to get, by the time you get your approvals done and then your monitoring system and the testing,
Yep.
the well pump and all the other stuff all done, he said that if there was something in that area that could be tied in for a future project, he would just soon hand them $1 million to facilitate stuff and upgrading their system as to creating a whole new one. So with that said, I guess what the opportunity is, if you address it in your zoning and start looking at it ahead of time, then if that opportunity comes up, maybe the town's in a better situation to do it than not talking about it at all and then saying, oh, we should have, we could have, it's one of those,
Well, but why
ways to
couldn't
start.
you do that anyway? If they were, because, we got the Dove development and they were talking about there's another lot behind that they could put residents in. And if you go beyond where the wells are, because you've got the mixed, the
Yeah,
use
no.
building, and then you go out and there's the wells that are out there, there's property out beyond that. I mean, what currently prevents if they start developing out beyond where the wells are, that they couldn't come back to Dove development and go, hey, wonder if we tied into your wells
Well, see, that's what Tom was saying. It's a different type of system. When you exceed that 40 gallons a minute, then it's a different type of system. It's got a different type of approval or something. And then if one system happens to have an issue where it can't produce enough for a while, you have other ones that tied in help out. I'm not a water expert. I'm just trying to relate. No, maybe you could talk to him and maybe get a straighter answer than I'm able to give you, if you know what I'm saying.
The other piece that comes to mind from this is if you really think about building out a downtown center, at some point, what you want is you want to have kind of close-knit, you want to have a close-knit walkable section of Route 9 right there between the intersection of 9 and 125 and all the way up to beyond where Dove Development is building back in there. And ultimately, at some point, the houses and farmhouses along there most likely get torn down, and then you end up with mixed-use buildings in there, where the lots right now may not be able to sustain the larger mixed-use kind of
Have the
function.
separation with their wells and septics and
Septics,
all
right.
the other stuff. So
Where if you functioned it where you had a town, like a private entity that managed the water component of it, now all you have to deal with is the septic side of it, because now you've got a functional water stay.
That's what he was
through
talking
there.
about with.
Which is similar to the Swings Lake
Correct. That's what he
Right.
was saying. That's,
system.
that's that up, but these multiple ones could tie together to have an association thing like that.
Okay, but I mean, Swings Lake, that already exists.
Right.
I'm just having trouble understanding what in the master plan
I think that,
ordinances
well,
do we need to add?
I think he was thinking that it would be beneficial for the town to encourage something like that instead of having a whole bunch of these 40 gallon a minute here, another 40 gallon a minute here, another 40 gallon a minute here, another one over here. I think he was thinking that it would be beneficial for the town to have something that's more of a system that's regulated by an association instead of these hit and miss spots all over the place. And I think that's why he reached out to the town. Now, between him and Stratford Regional, they could probably answer all kinds of questions that you're asking that I can't.
So one of the variables on this, and this is where I will caution the board, because I've not opened my big trap in prior years when I should have, looking at what's happening now, is that when I look at this, I probably don't want to give up or create the water piece until we've really thought about what a downtown center is going to look like and function like, because otherwise, the moment you have it there, now it makes things a lot more viable for some large development group to come in and be like, woohoo, let's snag this up because Barrington's ripe for the pickings.
But that's why it fits to do it as part of your future land use. Because as you look at your future land use and how you want to set it up, you can see how it all ties and works together. And that's the chapter that you guys were planning on doing this year. So it kind of all fits together as, like you said, you want to make sure you got a plan, how it's going to all fit together. So it makes sense it would be done as part of this chapter.
Okay, well, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't take advantage of. I mean, the master plan chapters, they're drafted and then, you know.
It's going to take probably all year to get it done.
Get it done. It comes to the board, we review it. And so, I mean, if we included those portions in the plan and then the board reviews it, and we can make comment and or say, well, looking at this, this isn't appropriate, so we line it out. I mean, it doesn't hurt to put that in there and look at it.
Start the discussion, yeah.
Yeah, and then.
It might not go anywhere, but it could.
Might not go anywhere, but at least.
So I guess where I'm at now, do we, because I'm Carol, hopefully she'll speak up on this, but about reaching out to Stratford Regional, about trying to
Right.
get this stuff together. to
Do we
get it
have the
started
funding for that?
As soon as possible.
this year?
We have funding this year to do that chapter.
Okay,
It's already in place and,
all right.
I guess where we're at now is, would you like her to reach out now and start doing it? I'll give her Tom's information and she can pass that on.
I don't see why not, because we didn't do work on one last year.
Right, last year we didn't,
We
correct.
didn't, so I think we need to,
And then there was one scheduled to do this year, we put it in the budget so we could.
okay, well, I think we should. Yeah, yeah,
Agree.
you agree?
The land use one?
That's the one, the future land. use.
Yeah, future.
On the planning board page, the existing land use from 2016 is on here.
Okay.
Yep.
And you're gonna reach out to Stratford Regional, see about what their schedule is and how we can probably put stuff together?
Absolutely. Yep.
Right.
Yep. I'll have a chat with Jen about that and I'll review everything that you have. So I'm up to speed on what you've done so far.
and talk to Tom.
And with that said, I guess maybe it would be a good time to bring it up. We are gonna be starting to do interviews for planners that have come in. So I think if we can get Stratford Regional to get scheduled, we'd be working with the new planner as part of this, which would be a good thing. I think the timing's all gonna fit together, don't you, Connor?
I agree.
If we get things
Yeah.
started now.
It sounds, okay. Yeah, I
And
think we're good with that.
Carol, Jen won't be surprised that we're interested in their help with the future land use chapter. I exchanged emails with her back in October, letting her know that we were budgeting for it and approximately what our budget was.
Oh,
Which
great.
I told her 8,000, so we'll hold her to the.
Okay, if memory serves me correctly, in the past, the board has just come to a consensus. We haven't had a formal vote and we
Correct.
just authorized the land use office to go ahead and,
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody's on
get it
board,
going.
everybody's in.
Yep.
And,
I-
and we're going in the right direction on how
Right.
we're starting this.
Right.
Everybody in concurrence with that?
yep. Yep, we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yep, we're good.
All
Okay.
right.
It's an interesting question. It's true, it's kind of silly to have a bunch of high productivity wells so close to each other. This is a stratified drift aquifer, and the water table's usually pretty close. I can see the point that it's unnecessary infrastructure to have so many wells so close. But with a stratified drift aquifer, there's also potential for contamination and traveling distances and the concerns about backup supplies with droughts. So it's tricky. And it has to be related to how septic is dealt with. You have to deal with both somehow.
But Steve, talking about wells being in close proximity, as we discovered during the drought a couple of years ago. I mean, my house sits between two other houses. I can tell you that the recharge rates, water qualities for those three wells, which are only, like 150 feet away from her, are separated by bedrock and have totally different recharge rate and water qualities. So
Well,
you can have two wells 100 feet apart, but they may not be drawing from the same aquifer.
That is possible, but that's the difference. In the downtown area, that's stratified drift aquifer, that there's a lot more flow, a lot more potential flow underground than there is on Prance Road with us.
And what I found strange about all this, that stratified drift aquifer is all running water on top of the bedrock, and all these wells are deep down drilled wells that go way down in. They did say that depends on the fissures or the cracks to whether that stratified drift goes into those wells or it goes into wells 100 miles from here. They don't know until they start drawing on the water. I mean, when I saw the whole study behind all that, it blew my mind that, okay, one thing can be totally unrelated to another. They're not always tied because of proximity.
Well, and that's the case on France Road. I mean, literally, we got three wells that are only like 150 feet away from each other. And yet, like I said, water quality, two of us have to have water conditioning systems to remove the iron that is so bad, it'll kill a dishwasher in a year and a half. And then the third neighbor has Zippo iron in it. They have a recharge rate of over 40 gallons per minute. I have over 20, but the next house over, 4.
I've also built a house on top of a hill where you could see all around every direction and got a true artesian where the water's coming up out of it. So that water supply has to be higher than the top of that well in order for it to be an artesian well.
Yeah.
So who knows, what that water could be coming from 200 miles away.
Yeah. New Hampshire in particular, observing it, having built houses with the family up in Maine and then looking at New Hampshire. I've never seen anything that how aquifers are so segregated as they are around this state. It's amazing.
I have the same issue when I drilled on my property or when we drilled on the property in New
It's a real
York
nice place.
that I have, the well is like right on the top of bedrock. And I mean, I have great flow. I end up with like
By the same people.
about 50 gallons a minute running through there. It's
Place
unbelievable.
in
The
Rochester.
prior owner had drilled
Sophie's.
15 feet away
Sophie's
from
is-
there and drilled 250 feet and still didn't have good pumping water.
Right.
So it was just a matter of shifting.
The house I'm building now,
As soon as you
and if what you set price,
cross over.
I had no water, 360, I got 60 gallons a minute.
Snake
Yeah.
And now static level is like 10.
And then talk to,
Yeah.
Okay, so we've taken care of that. We're going to move forward with the master plan. All right,
So
on to other business.
well, the other stuff about the stuff on your, because you talked about master plan, the site review and subdivision regulations.
Yes, I will be forwarding something in the next week on the subdivision regulations.
So I guess for agenda purposes, do you guys want to plan on?
I think we
holding that
just,
Second meeting? or do you
Yes,
wanna bring
second
stuff
meeting.
Together before you start determining to do that?
well, I think that it needs to be distributed at least one meeting ahead of the discussion. Right? So
Yeah,
if I got it to you guys before the next meeting, it could be distributed for the next meeting for
So the
discussion at the
second
second.
meeting in March, do you want to reserve it just for that discussion, or do you think
Sure.
it would be more beneficial?
I don't know. Is 2 weeks adequate for people to look at the changes?
I thought it was that one.
I would think so.
And I'm assuming that you got
Sorry,
enough of a
talk-
discussion that we want to blank that out from nothing else other than those.
So for subdivision, regulation changes,
Mhm.
if they're distributed and you got 2 weeks to look at it.
That's
is that
perfect.
Oh, yeah.
adequate?
Perfect.
I think 2 weeks at
All
least,
right.
yeah.
Okay, second meeting, yeah.
Second meeting, we're gonna hold just for that.
And we'll try not to move anything forward to that meeting.
Well, we can watch when things come in March.
Right.
If it's something small and depends on how many changes you got and how much you think the discussion's gonna be.
Okay. All right, on to our favorite topic. Building permits. Now, do you have something to report?
I sure do. So the select board at last night's meeting approved the updated Class 6 and private road building policy. This mimics the recommendations from the planning board almost to the T, with some other additions and adjustments. Really revamps the whole process, what the expectations are, puts the onus on the property owner to be clear upfront while making an application, what they intend to do. What do they intend to do for road improvements? What's the scope? What specifically will they be doing? Are they adding gravel? Are they establishing drainage, installing culverts, et cetera? And all of that is expected upfront to be able to be reviewed by department heads, reviewed by the planning board, and reviewed by the select board. Whereas right now, the select board with the input from the road agent is kind of coming up with what the road improvements would be. So I think all involved think it's going to be a improvement to the process. So John Huckins reached out to everybody, these three applicants 2 weeks ago and said, hey, the select board is willing to schedule your hearings to the 14th, but if you want to wait, they're updating the policy. There might be other options if you don't want to meet the 16, 2 and 2. None of the three of them wanted to meet the 16, 2 and 2, so they decided to wait. So now we're at the point, we have the new policy. If they intend to continue not doing the 16, 2 and 2, what they're going to have to do is apply pursuant to this policy. Supply all the documents that are required by the policy, which is different than where they applied under the old policy.
Do we have a copy of the new policy?
Man, I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
We'll send that out.
I haven't seen a
It
copy.
was just approved last night, right?
Yeah,
So-
well, I understand.
Yeah. So, but we'll get you a copy of that. So anyways, John and I talked about it today. It's unfortunate for the three applicants that they applied under the policy, and they would have had the opportunity to meet that policy, but they didn't want to. They presumably will prefer to have the options under the new policy. In order to do that, they're likely going to have to reapply. A lot of the information is going to be the same, but reapply under the new policy with the details, what they intend to do, et cetera. So John and I, in talking about your review tonight, think you could probably do two things. One, if you're comfortable with the road improvement requirements of either 16, 2 and 2 or 10%, which is in the policy, even though you don't have it in front of you, then you presumably could review these applications and say, as long as they meet the policy as it was recently adopted, we're comfortable with it, we would recommend approval. Or if you'd like to see the full application materials, which I think you probably would, then we would schedule those for March 1st, your meeting on March 1st, and then the select board hearing would be on March 14th. So up to you how you want to handle it. But with the new process, we'd like to follow the process, right? We got a new policy, we'd like to follow.
That's first.
All three applicants, I did send them an email today with the new policy and told them we needed additional information to comply with the new regulations. So one of them replied back. They were under the old policy and they didn't want to do it. And I told them, no, they're under the new policy. So the other two haven't replied back to me yet. But I'm assuming we'll get the information on how they're gonna plan on complying with it before 2 weeks from now. If you guys wanted to see how they're looking at it.
I don't speak for the select board, but I assume that that one applicant that says they're under the old policy, if they are going to meet that old policy, the select board would likely be willing to consider it. But I expect that they're probably not willing to meet.
They don't want to upgrade, they did not want to upgrade the road, but they felt they were under the provisions where they could get a building permit without upgrading the road or having to do the 10%. Because the 10% wasn't written in the road. I'm the guy in the middle.
Well, yeah, I guess I would like to
I'd like to
wait.
see it.
Yeah, you'd like to
Yeah.
see it. Okay. The only, there is one of these, That we-
In the basement underneath.
yes, that we might consider that regardless of what way they go, it wouldn't make a difference.
That one there was a 14-foot gravel path with shoulders. So that one there was.
Well, the road agent says though that
I mean,
Eagle Drive has been paved.
14-foot pavement, I think. Was
Right, it's 14, right, it's 14 foot with marginal shoulders abutting CJ. So the road's already paved. You're not changing the footprint. Yes, if you had a basement, more people could stay there. But
This is the
I
Ron
just-
Allen one?
yeah,
No, that's a different one.
I don't know. This is the one on Eagle Drive.
That one there would be,
I just
in
don't,
order to meet the policy of the 16.2 and 2, they would have to widen the shoulder.
They'd have to-
because It wouldn't have to be 8-foot gravel. So
yeah.
they made it so that it was 20-foot gravel way. It would meet that requirement.
But that's also, that lot is cornered on what, Golf Course Lane, isn't it,
Yes.
also?
Yeah. Golf course lane is the one that's all paved.
Right, and now they paved Eagle Drive, and the Eagle Drive is only servicing
I
one,
think golf course is paved. Eagle Drive's not. And Eagle Drive only has like 300 and they're like right on the corner.
according to the road agent, Eagle Drive was paved.
Oh, I thought you were talking about golf course. Maybe.
I've inspected the roadway along the frontage of 15 Eagle Drive and make the following observations. The road has been paved within the last 2 years, is in very good condition. So if the road's already, and I look at the number of lots that are being serviced by Eagle Drive, no, there aren't many. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Paved road. It's a corner lot. As far as emergency access, you've got
Oh, you got almost.
Golf Course Lane. You got a
T intersection.
you got a T intersection, Golf Course Lane, which appears to is also paved and appears to be even wider than Eagle Drive. So, and they're not changing the footprint of the house. So on this particular, the other two, I guess my suggestion would be for the other two, yeah, let's wait and see, what comes in for the application. We can table that until March 1st, but we can wait till March 1st on this one, or we could discuss this one, because I'm not sure it makes any difference.
28 still, right?
Select board is.
Yeah. The planning board is this one totally with, select board consider this one 28.
If they intend to, the applicant intends to apply under the new policy, then I would expect that the select board would want an application.
Right.
With the requirements of the new policy. I think the select board would probably be okay with the planning board reviewing it before having all of those materials, because that's not really the precise purpose of the planning board review. Planning board review is more about access and what other projects are going on that might impact.
And this one's minor work. There wouldn't be a huge amount of money to go towards the road anyway, because it's just putting a foundation underneath an existing house.
So if they
So
went
it's-
10%.
Yeah, it's not gonna be 10% of a new home where you got
Right.
200 or 300,000.
But if you consider that they're not changing the footprint of the house, they're putting a basement underneath a house, you're not really changing anything with respect to that road. So, I think with respect to the planning board consideration, do we really need to hold on to this one?
No.
No.
I mean, my thought was, we already have a packet of stuff for March 1st.
Right, yep.
And now we're adding at least these two. The more things we can get off our plate, the better. If people don't feel it's necessary to hold this one up.
I don't feel it's necessary.
Because I think.
Andy, what do you think?
$10,000 or $15,000 job.
Steve?
Okay.
Steve's gonna.
Steve?
I would kind of rather wait. I don't know if it's relevant. I'd want to be able to review the policy before I know, so I'd rather wait.
Policies up.
Do you want me to give you a 3-minute overview of the policy?
It's
I
up
mean,
there.
I get it's right there, but I mean, it's not the same as me reading it
No,
myself.
I wasn't saying it to change your mind or make a decision, but I'm happy to go over it before you review the
Sure.
paper copy.
Sure. Why don't you go?
So authority is the same, 674-41. Purpose is the same, about access, safe emergency access. Application, this is where it starts to get a little bit different. So it applies to all building permits on Class 6 and private roads. There's 3 separate categories, and these categories are important because of the statutory authority. Category 1 is very little required. They make an application, they sign a waiver. This is anything that general maintenance, repair, replacements of materials with similar materials, accessory improvements, decks and porches. Category 2 was previously in our section 1, which didn't require anything. But interestingly, the statute, when it talks about the review by the planning board and select board, it's for the erection of buildings. And so a shed of more than 200 square feet is the erection of a building that requires a building permit. And by statute, it requires a review by the planning board and approval by the select board. But because it doesn't add living space, we have this as like an abbreviated review where they fill out the application, they sign the waiver, it comes to planning board for almost on like a consent agenda. It goes to the select board on the consent agenda.
Okay, but this category 2 would be applicable to the one we were just talking
No,
about.
because of the added volume. If you read category 3, it talks about
He's doing a walkout basement on that one and changing that walkout basement into living space.
Okay.
additions that add the volume to the existing building. Yep. So anyways, that's category 2. Again, category 1 and 2 are very simple applications, don't require a lot, don't require road improvements, property maps, anything like that. The real addressing the purpose of the policy is category 3, any new habitable space, everything that you've seen before requiring road improvements. And the requirements are the application, the waiver, detailed property map, road improvements, which we'll talk about in a second, a road maintenance agreement, which was required before, but we never really collected them, permit and bond if it's on a Class 6 road, department head recommendation, planning board, select board hearing, and an application fee to pay for the notices to abutters and things like that. And then the requirements, this section details what each of those requirements means. And so the application, the waiver, planning board review and comment, it explains the statutory authority for the planning board review and explains that the planning board will review after comments are received by the department heads, et cetera. Select board consent agenda. This is just for that category 2. Detailed property map, what is required for that. For road improvements, this is the Ron Allard section where we have 2 options. Option 1, so this is all if it doesn't meet the minimum standard, which is 16.2 and 2, which most of them don't. Option 1 is to bring it to the 16.2 and 2, which is similar to the old policy. But option 2 is that 10%, making improvements equal to 10% of the construction costs. And so what this requirement requires of the applicant is to detail specifically how they will accomplish either of those with the application. So we'll expect to see a scope from a construction company that says, we're going to deliver 5 loads of gravel. We're going to grade, 1,000 feet of road. We're going to
Or from the
install these
resident.
culverts. Or from the resident, but a scope. that describes what specifically is going to be done. So then the department heads have something to review and say, okay, we like this, but we'd like this turnaround, we'd like to move this culvert, et cetera. So that's, and then in all cases, road agent, fire chief, and or police chief will review, make recommended changes. Road maintenance agreement, which something interesting that I think should be spread far and wide. RSA 231-81-A is a new statute passed by the legislature in 2019. And what this statute says is that property owners that live on roads not maintained by the town have a statutory duty to contribute financially to the maintenance of that road. And it hasn't been litigated. It's new legislation. I don't know how it has been received out in the wild, but this is a really important statute when it comes to neighbors trying to compel other neighbors on private or class 6 roads to contribute to road maintenance. Now they have a statutory provision, still be a civil matter, but they have a statutory provision they can point to. So I thought it was important to reference that here. It doesn't really matter to us, but it's good to.
No, but that's important. So if, like on this one, you got 5 people down Eagle Drive. And so if the person at the end, the first 3 houses out of the 5 that are on Eagle Drive, if the road's great, but then after that, it goes downhill. And so it needs to be maintained. Well, the first 3 people go, no, I'm not gonna pay anything. I like the road as far as I'm concerned. Now they would be obligated to contribute to.
The language is interesting because I actually asked the free attorney, the New Hampshire Municipal Association attorney, about that because I could pull up the statute, but there's ambiguity on whether the first house on the road has a statutory responsibility here to maintain beyond his road, beyond his driveway, his or her driveway. But anyways, yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Well, I was gonna say that like on Baxter Lane, and in that area, Otter and Baxter and all that, they're supposed to, way back in the 50s and 60s when the land was turned over, it's in a lot of the deeds that you will contribute to road maintenance. Once it's in the deed, they can't get out of it.
Right.
Yeah, but there's a lot of them that don't have it in their deeds.
Right.
And they own the property, and that's where the legal quandary comes in.
Yeah.
Can you go back on them after the fact?
Right. I think Mr.
That's
Allen,
that's the
Mr. Allen did recently take one to off of Otter, Summer Otter.
So it sounds like the 10% money gets used immediately with the supervision of the road agent.
Yes.
There's not a provision to use it later in a different way.
Correct. Because we have no way to enforce it after we issue them a certificate of occupancy. And so we wouldn't be able to, if they reneged on their promise to, put half of the money into the road the following year, and they didn't do that, we wouldn't have any real teeth to ensure that they would.
So the process would be they submit the application, goes through reviews, the board, the select board says, okay, it's basically a conditional approval. It says you will get your building permit, but prior to a certificate of occupancy, it's a precedent condition for the certificate of occupancy that the improvements that you committed to are done.
Precisely. And it could be that those improvements are best performed in the spring or the summer or the fall. They might not get their certificate of occupancy until they can do those improvements at a seasonable time.
Or they could bond the money to do that.
Nope.
So let's say they gotta close with the bank in winter. They can't do the work until spring. They can't move in their house for all those months and they got no place to live.
Not till the money's spent. The problem is we can't hold a bond on a private road.
Yeah.
We do that on driveways, which are on private roads, but they can't get their culverts in or the pavement.
Yeah, I talked to the town's attorney at length about bonding the work, and unequivocally, her recommendation was that,
Maybe we were doing it wrong on the driveway stuff if it wasn't on the town road.
yeah, We might have to look into that. I don't know specifically.
I was just
about
basing on
driveways,
past history.
The
but-
word
but-
recommendation is important. That's not a,
No, what
it's
she
not a thou
emphasized,
shalt.
what she asked is, she said, who would hold the bond? And she said the town or the road association. I said, well, the town or the authority. She said, you can't hold the bond on a private road.
So why
Well,
couldn't
I
the road
kind of
association?
don't understand that because,
The road association.
you know, I mean, when somebody builds a subdivision or somebody, has a site plan, then, they're going to build a road in there. And it's not, the town doesn't own it for at least 2 years, right? And it's got to vote to accept it. So for that period of time, it is a private road, and yet we bond those.
Exactly.
I think that authority is derived from subdivision and site review authority, separate than the only authority we have here is 674-41. Whereas the authority that you have in zoning, in establishing a zoning ordinance and establishing requirements. But I can ask a question. The road maintenance agreement, purpose of the road maintenance agreement is to establish those types of things that some people have in their deeds, but start establishing as a requirement anytime somebody does work that qualifies, that they record a road maintenance agreement at the registry, and we can point future residents to that agreement that's recorded, to a recorded instrument they can hold to. If it's on a class 6 road, it will require a permit. Department head recommendations, pretty similar to the old policy, what they're going to look at, what they would recommend. Select board hearing, a lot the same. Application fee, again, this is $50 if it's approved. If it's approved only, will be included and collected with the building permit fee. And the purpose is to cover the administrative costs of sending notices and things like that. There is a waiver provision in here, which mimics almost precisely the waiver process in 674-33, which is the zoning board variance request. It establishes criteria that they need to meet, and they're required to provide a narrative on how they meet those criteria and why. The intent of this waiver process is to leave the door open, but very narrowly open, that only for extenuating circumstances does the waiver process be used. And then the appeal, as indicated in the statute, is to the zoning board. They have the statute.
If you roll it back down to the waiver stuff, that one you just talked about, Jeff, because of that road being paved and the whole bit coming down through, if you start reading through some of them waiver things, that one might almost fit into that waiver request that you were talking about,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't completely conform.
And that would be up to the applicant.
Right, but I mean, but then the selectmen could look at it. I think there might be justification going through that if that's what they chose to do.
For 15, if 10% is $1,000 or $1,500,
They're better off just giving
Might
it because of that little small.
you know.
Now, if someone was building a new house in that same
Mhm.
corner, then it might be worth going this route.
But if they were building a new house, then they probably wouldn't have as good of a case for a waiver, right? Because they're adding livable space and adding a unit and things like that. So anyways, that's the policy. You'll see a copy of it. It sounds like, I don't know if you took a vote, I think you're gonna recommend one for.
Well, no, it sounded like some people still wanted to see it, so.
Oh.
All right, I'll tell you what, I'll make a motion to continue consideration of items 4, 5, and 6 on the agenda for February 15th to March 1st, 2022.
Second.
All right, motion made by Jeff Brand, seconded by Andy M. To continue these 3 reviews until March 1st. Roll call vote, Dodam Suchi,
Masucci, aye.
Andy, am I?
Andy Knapp,
Yep, aye.
Steve Diamond,
Diamond Eye?
and Jeff Brand, aye. All right, so it carries unanimously. These are continued until March 1st. All right, is there any other business that we need to discuss?
It's not official business, but John's here tonight. And, interested in what's going on
Perspective,
and perspective on being on the board. I don't know if you
and I need, 2 approvals of the selectmen?
Those guys are
Right,
jerks.
2 meetings. Yeah, those guys. Yeah, so we'll go for discussion at the next meeting.
The people that cause all the trouble.
Right.
I wouldn't be too concerned because you go to the select, you fill out the application, you go to the select board and they go, you want to be part of the planning board?
You
Okay.
want to volunteer? You want to be a citizen volunteer?
Wow, yeah, come on.
Okay, I'm glad you could join us. All right, then, the next meeting will be March 1st at 6:30 PM. At the same-
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Masucci, aye.
Okay,
Andy, am I?
Nap aye.
All right.
aye.
Okay.
All right, meeting adjourned.